September, the weather has broken, it's beautiful out, and we got a lot of action happening. And actually we have action happening right now, we'll show you later on in this week. We got Andy over here with his GTX, he's come down with a load of parts, so Wednesday we'll cover what he's doing over there. Over the weekend, the Junkyard Jet guys tore their 360 apart, so we'll go over that on Thursday. Tomorrow we're going to show you a car that we featured, that we found yesterday at the Slant Six Nationals, or the Slanted Nationals. This thing is trick. Wait till you get a load of this. That'll be for tomorrow. But for today, I want to talk about Plan Z, and we finally got her to a track. We took it down to Missouri to the Slanted Nationals. It was a small crowd, but it was a great crowd. We met so many cool people there. Everybody who came up and introduced themselves, said hi, took a picture, whatever. Thank you so much. I appreciated meeting you as much as, you know, it's mutual, right? So here's where we are with this. We finally got our first passes on the car. And I want to talk about the stages of evolution of a project, of any project, and troubleshooting, because this is where we're at now. We have to troubleshoot. So every project starts out the same way. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a race car like this, or if it's a street car, or if it's a restaurant. It doesn't make a difference what kind of project it is. They all follow the same basic path. You have the idea, you get the car, you gather the parts, you put them together in whatever form or fashion that you deem. You get it to basically function, and then comes the sorting. And it's always going to be something like it overheats, or this hose is too loose and it pops out, or this leaks, or this doesn't fit right, or this vibrates. There's always something. It's a sorting out process. And that's where we're at with this now. So we took her yesterday. We made a total of 4 passes. I was hoping to establish a baseline, but it's too far away from where it should be to have a baseline. So here's what happened. The car functions great. So the suspension, the tires, the converter, all of its systems, the cooling system, everything works exactly the way it should. And it drives down the track like a go-kart. It's perfect. But we have a performance issue. And now we're going to work through this performance issue. So here's what we have. Car reaches about 4,000 RPM, and that's it, 4,100, 4,200 RPM, and she will not pull any higher than that. It'll free rev higher, it'll free rev to 6,500, but under load, 4,500 is it, 4,200 is it. Up to that point, it pulls hard, and then she just refuses to go any further. So, troubleshooting, the first part of troubleshooting is to go through the process of elimination. And like I said, you can't start troubleshooting until the whole car functions as it's supposed to. You have to be able to drive it and actually go through the motions, and then you can start whittling down. So luckily enough, everything worked out fine with this car in that respect. So now we have to whittle down. We have to go through the process of elimination. So driving the car, we find that while it stops pulling just over 4,000 RPM, it doesn't make any indication of an ignition problem. So in other words, there's no missing, there's no sputtering or anything like that. It just gets flat. That's as far as she'll go. We know that it's not an overly lean condition because you would have missing, popping, so on and so forth. We know it's not fat because it didn't sound like it was laboring. And you can't really, well, I'll get to that in a second, as far as why we can't get a plug reading on it yet. But that flatness, all of the bases are covered. So the valve lash is set right. Obviously, it's getting full throttle. It's getting good spark. It's getting everything it's supposed to get. But she's flat. So knowing that all of the basics are there and functioning correctly, then we have to look at, like, what are the systems? Which of the systems are we going to have a problem with? So when we go to the motor is nothing unorthodox about the engine. We know it's got tons of compression. I mean, you can hear that just cranking it. You don't have to do a test. You can hear it cranking. It hits each cylinder. We know that the head porting is nothing radical. They're not like huge ports where it's just, it's not going to function. And it pulls nice and strong downstairs. We know that it's not missing, bucking, backfiring. It has no indication of an ignition issue. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with the things that control the engine besides the ignition, which would be the carburetor and the camshaft. So now I know we have an issue with the carburetor. On this thing, we use a 750 vacuum secondary Holly. Figuring that 750 CFM is a lot for something like this to drink. But you're only dealing with 375 CFM on the 2-barrel. And if it wants more, it'll take it. Well, I'm starting to believe that there isn't enough motor, there just isn't enough cubic inch to create a demand enough to open the secondaries. Now, we've already got the lightest spring in it, so it's the short yellow spring. And the check ball is already out of the secondary diaphragm, which means that this thing, let's say I had this carburetor set up on a 350-inch engine. It would be enough that it would bog that motor. You hit the throttle and the secondaries would just flop open, and it would actually create a bog with the engine. But on this setup over here, I have no indication at all that the secondaries are open. There's no difference in sound or feel or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons why we can't even look at plug jetting yet or plug coloring for jetting yet, because we're not getting the carburetor that we need. So the first step, before I go to the first step, the other possibility is the camshaft. We'll talk about the camshaft in depth if the carburetor doesn't fix this. But I think, well, it's a possibility that we focused so much on bottom end power, because the Slant Six has an overall lack of bottom end power, as one of its characteristics. We focused so much on bottom end power that we may have sacrificed upstairs. So the carburetor is the first. When you're making troubleshooting changes, when you're trying to chase a problem, you only make one change at a time. Because if you make too many changes at a time, 2 or 3 changes at a time, you don't really know which one did it. So we're going to go with the simplest, easiest, most obvious one first. So like I said, I have no indication that I have secondary operation on this. And 375 CFM is not enough to support this engine with this cam, open exhaust, and all of that. So there is a possibility that it's just the secondaries not opening that is giving us the flat performance. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap this thing over. This is a 650 Holley. It's a double pumper. It's a mechanical secondary carburetor. So the first change we're going to make is we're going to go through this. This has been sitting on my shelf. I have no idea what the insides of it are like. So we're going to pull this apart, go through it, and then drop it on here and run it up to Buffalo Valley probably on Saturday, this coming Saturday, weather permitting. And finally, we have a dog sitter I can trust, so we can actually go places and spend a little time. Easier said than done, let me tell you. So we're going to go through this carburetor, make sure it's all functional, that we're just be able to bolt it on and go, and give that a shot. I think this is going to make the difference, because where we were with this was in the bottom 10s, like 10-0s or 10-teens. That's as far as it would go. I don't have any performance goals for this thing, but I do know that that's way off what it should be, and it's also way off the way it feels seat of the pants, pulling up to that 4,200, 4,300 RPM stall that it has. So first thing we're going to do is try this. If this gets the engine to pull clean to, I'm going to say 5,500, 6,000 RPM. If this, then we're good, and then we can start really fine tuning. We can play with timing, we can play with jetting, we can play with the distributor, with the spark plugs, and all of the things that fine tune it. And if this doesn't fix the trick, then we need to go and do a deep dive on the camshaft. And it's possible that we just went too far in the name of trying to make it work downstairs and sacrifice the upstairs. So, and I don't even want to talk about the camshaft yet. We'll talk about that if this doesn't work. So that's where we're at with this thing. As far it was a successful trip. Our trailer is done. This thing is over. I actually had to weld the piece of it this morning that broke on the way. It dropped a plank out of the middle, so this thing is toast. I'm going to try to milk the rest of the season out of it and find something more suitable for next year. And tomorrow, like I said, we shot a car there yesterday called the Ruster, right? You guys are going to love this thing. I mean, this is like backyard science fiction engineering to the max, and the car runs hard. He runs like 1160s with this thing. It's a normally aspirated Slant Six. So tomorrow we'll have that video for you. And in the meantime, that's it. I have a lot of work to do. I'm going to go give Andy a hand with what he's working on over there, and I'll see you tomorrow.